Orc girl is forced into marriage with a human noble to save her people. A shocking legacy awaits. There are moments in life where you realize that everything you thought you knew about yourself was a carefully constructed lie. Corva had that moment on her wedding day, surrounded by enemies, wearing chains disguised as ceremony, about to marry the man whose soldiers had slaughtered half her clan. The throne room of Castle Thornwick smelled like expensive wine, beeswax candles, and barely concealed contempt. Corva knelt on the red carpet, not because she wanted to, but because 3 crossbows were aimed at her father's head from the gallery above. Chieftain Cromgar sat on a guest throne that was really just a very fancy cage. His hands were bound with silver chains. Silver, because someone in this castle had done their research and knew that orcs found silver particularly uncomfortable against their skin. Not painful, just wrong, like wearing wet leather that never dried. Behind her, Lord Reynold Thornwick stood in armor so polished it could probably blind someone if the light hit it right. He wore a crown. She wore shame. The priest, some old human with a voice like gravel being slowly ground into dust, was reading from a book that had more gold leaf than actual words. The ceremony was in that fancy version of common that humans used when they wanted to sound important. Corva understood maybe 1 word in 5. Not that it mattered. She knew what she was agreeing to. Ownership, leash, trophy. Her people watched from the galleries. 23 orcs, all that remained of the Iron Peak clan after the siege. 23 survivors out of 87. They watched their chieftain's daughter kneel before the enemy. Some had tears on their green faces. Others had the kind of blank expression that came from seeing too much death in too short a time. Corva had that expression too. She was 24 years old, had killed her first deer at 7, her first raider at 15, had earned her warrior braids at 18 when she'd held the Northern Pass against a rival clan for 3 days straight with nothing but 12 warriors and a really inconvenient sense of duty. Now she knelt in a dress. A human dress with approximately 17,000 buttons that she'd needed Sybil's help to fasten. Sybil was the servant girl assigned to her, 19 years old, nervous hands, and a habit of humming lullabies when she was anxious. She'd been humming constantly since Corva arrived 3 days ago. The girl was currently standing in the corner, humming so quietly it was barely audible, watching with wide eyes as her new mistress was legally transferred from one owner to another. The priest said something in fancy common. Reynold responded. His voice was steady, practiced. The voice of someone who'd been trained since childhood to sound confident even when making catastrophically bad decisions. Then the priest turned to Corva. And do you, Corva of Iron Peak, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to honor and obey, in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live. There was a pause, long enough that she could hear her father's breathing from across the room, long enough that one of the human nobles coughed awkwardly. Corva looked up, met Reynold's eyes for the first time since entering the throne room. He looked tired, not physically tired, the kind of tired that came from carrying weights no one else could see. His jaw was tight, his hands were clenched at his sides, and for just a moment, just one single moment, she saw something in his expression that looked almost like an apology. "I do," she said. The words tasted like iron, like blood, like every compromise her father had ever made to keep their people alive. The priest smiled. "Then by the power vested in me by the church and the crown, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Reynold hesitated. Then he leaned down. He was only 3 centimeters taller than her, which Corva found oddly insulting, and pressed his lips to hers for exactly 2 seconds. It wasn't a kiss. It was a signature, a seal on a contract written in desperation. The human nobles applauded. The orcs in the gallery did not, and just like that, Corva went from being a warrior to being a wife. TT. The feast afterward was the kind of elaborate waste of resources that made Corva's warrior brain scream. 7 courses, each one served on plates that probably cost more than most people earned in a year. She sat at the head table next to Reynold, picking at roasted pheasant and trying not to calculate how many of her people could eat for a week on what was being thrown away in this single meal. Reynold ate in silence, drank very little, nodded politely when other nobles came to congratulate him, but he didn't look happy. He looked like a man attending his own funeral. "You don't have to pretend," Corva said quietly in common. Her accent was thick. Orcs had trouble with certain human sounds, made words feel clunky in her mouth, but understandable. Reynold glanced at her. "Pretend what? That this is anything other than what it is." She gestured at the room. "Transaction. You get peace. I get—" She paused. "A live father. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I didn't want this either. But you chose it. No, I inherited it. He set down his wine cup. My father started this war. I'm the one who has to end it. By buying Orc. By saving both our people from killing each other into extinction. His voice was low, careful. Your clan was 2 weeks from starvation. My kingdom was bleeding resources we don't have. This marriage ends the war. Stops the dying. Is it fair? No. But fairness is a luxury neither of us can afford. Corva studied him, really looked at him for the first time. Reynold Thornwick was 32, had a scar across his left eyebrow that spoke of old violence, hands that showed calluses from actual sword work, not just decorative holding of weapons for portraits. He looked like someone who'd been forced to become an adult way too young. She knew that feeling. My father, she said. When do you release him? Tomorrow, him and your people. They'll be given supplies, safe passage back to your territory, and a guarantee of no further aggression as long as the treaty holds. And I stay here. Yes, as your wife, your property, your proof that orcs can be tamed. Reynold's jaw tightened. As my wife, my ally, He stopped, started again. I'm not going to pretend this is love. I'm not going to pretend you have a choice. But I'm also not going to treat you like a possession. You'll have your own quarters, your freedom within the castle. Respect for my household or they answer to me. Respect, Corva repeated. The word sounded ridiculous in this context. I am Orc, in human castle, wearing dress, married to enemy. Where exactly is respect in this? In the fact that I'm offering it anyway. He met her eyes. I know what you sacrificed, what your father sacrificed. This treaty was bought with your freedom. The least I can do is make sure that freedom means something, even in captivity. There was something in his voice, something genuine. Corva had spent her life learning to read threats, to sense danger, to know when someone was lying. Reynold wasn't lying, which somehow made everything worse. Before she could respond, a man approached the table, late 50s, well-dressed with spectacles that caught the candlelight. He had the kind of face that looked trustworthy right up until you realized he was picking your pocket. Lord Reynold, the man said smoothly. Forgive the interruption. Master Fulbert, your father's chief advisor. I wanted to personally welcome the new Lady Thornwick to the family. He smiled at Corva. It didn't reach his eyes. Corva didn't smile back. Master Fulbert oversees the castle's finances and... Reynold's voice had gone carefully neutral. Administrative matters. I serve the Thornwick family, Fulbert said, pulling a cloth from his pocket and polishing his spectacles. The gesture looked absent-minded. Corva's instincts screamed that it wasn't. As I served your father, Lord Reynold, and his father before him. 3 generations of loyal service. Noted, Reynold said shortly. Fulbert replaced his spectacles, still smiling that smile that was really a threat, disguised as politeness. I do hope the Lady Corva finds our hospitality to her liking. I understand Orc customs can be quite different from our own. If there's anything she needs, anything at all, she need only ask. I need nothing, Corva said flatly. Of course, well. Fulbert inclined his head. Welcome to Castle Thornwick, my lady. I'm certain you'll find your new life here most enlightening. He walked away. Corva watched him go. I don't trust him, she said. Smart, Reynold replied. Neither do I. Seeker. The next 3 weeks existed in a strange suspended state that Corva could only describe as polite imprisonment. Her father and the others had been released as promised, given supplies and sent home. She'd watched from her tower window as they left. Promgar had looked back once, met her eyes across the distance, then turned and walked away. She'd cried that night, quietly, with her face pressed into a pillow that smelled like lavender instead of leather and smoke, cried until there was nothing left. Then she'd dried her eyes, braided her hair in the warrior style her mother had taught her, and decided that if she was going to be trapped in a gilded cage, she was at least going to understand the cage. The castle was massive, 43 rooms that she'd counted so far, and that was just the main keep. There were gardens, training yards, a library that made her fingers itch to explore, stables, servant quarters, a chapel, and approximately 9,000 corridors that all looked identical. Sybil followed her everywhere. The girl had appointed herself as Corva's permanent shadow, helping her navigate both the physical space and the social minefield of noble life. She was still humming constantly, but Corva had learned to find it oddly soothing. The West Wing is Lord Reynold's private quarters, Sybil explained one afternoon as they walked through yet another corridor. You're in the East Wing. It's actually quite unusual for a lord and lady to have separate quarters, but Lord Reynold insisted. Said you deserved your own space. Unusual how? Well, Sybil's cheeks went pink. Usually married couples share. That is, they... You know. I know, Corva said dryly. Humans have sex, not secret. Sybil's cheeks went from pink to red. Right, yes, of course. I just meant... Lord Reynold hasn't... He's been very respectful. He had been. In 3 weeks, Reynold had visited her quarters exactly 4 times, each time to discuss practical matters, her needs, her comfort, any complaints she had. He'd never touched her, never even sat down, just stood near the door, asked his questions, listened to her answers, and left. It was possibly the most awkward arranged marriage in human history. Where does he spend his time? Corva asked. The library, mostly, or the training yards. Lord Reynold isn't... Sybil paused, humming briefly. He isn't like his father was. The old lord loved feasts and parties and showing off. But Lord Reynold prefers books and solitude. Some of the older servants say he's too much like his mother. His mother? Lady Vivian. She died when Lord Reynold was 12. Fever, they said. Very sudden. Very... Sybil's voice dropped. Very strange, some whispered, though never where Lord Fulbert could hear. Corva stopped walking. What do you mean, strange? I shouldn't gossip about the family. Sybil. The girl bit her lip. Started humming. Stopped. Lady Vivian was... different. She preferred the company of servants to nobles. Spent time in the lower districts helping the poor. Collected old relics and strange artifacts. And she had... Sybil glanced around, lowered her voice further. She had a portrait in the private library. Lord Reynold's father had it removed after she died, but some of the older servants remember it. They said she looked wrong in it somehow. Something about her eyes, her features. Wrong how? I don't know. I wasn't born yet. But they said Lord Fulbert had the portrait locked away in the restricted section of the library. Said it wasn't appropriate for public display. Corva filed that information away. This restricted section, where is it? Oh, you can't go there. It's forbidden. Only Lord Reynold has the key, and even he rarely... Where, Sybil? The girl hummed nervously. The North Tower, 3rd floor, behind the section on military history. But please don't... Corva was already walking. Mean... The library of Castle Thornwick was the kind of place that made Corva understand why humans bothered building castles in the first place. 3 stories of books. Thousands of them. Histories, philosophies, tales of adventure, records of wars, maps of distant lands, knowledge stacked on knowledge. Her people had oral traditions. Stories passed from elder to elder, painted on cave walls, carved into stone. But this was different. This was memory made permanent. She'd been coming here for 5 days now. Taught herself to read better using a children's primer she'd found. Her common was improving, slowly. Reading was harder than speaking. All those silent letters that served no apparent purpose. On the 6th day, she found the door to the restricted section. It was locked, as Sybil had warned. But locks were just puzzles made of metal. Corva had grown up in a culture that valued cleverness as much as strength. She had her lockpicks back. Small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Reynold had returned them to her after the wedding, along with her hunting knife. You're my wife, not my prisoner, he'd said. Though I'd appreciate it if you didn't stab any of the nobles unless they really deserve it. She'd almost liked him in that moment. The lock clicked open on her 3rd attempt. The door swung inward with a creak that sounded unnaturally loud in the silent library. Corva glanced around. No one. She slipped inside and closed the door behind her. The restricted section was smaller than the main library. Darker. The books here were older, bound in cracked leather, some with titles in languages she didn't recognize. She moved through the stacks, running her fingers along spines, until she found what she was looking for. A portrait, covered with a cloth, leaning against the back wall. Corva pulled the cloth away. Lady Vivian Thornwick stared back at her from the canvas. Beautiful. Elegant. Wearing a green velvet dress and a small silver brooch at her throat. She had dark hair, pale skin, delicate features, and slightly pointed ears. Broader shoulders than a human woman should have. A jawline that was just a fraction too strong, and eyes that caught the light in a way that looked wrong. Not human wrong. Wrong in a way that was intimately, terrifyingly familiar. Corva knew those eyes. She saw variations of them every time she looked at her own reflection, every time she looked at her father, at Rokash, at every orc she'd ever known. Lady Vivian Thornwick had orc blood. The realization hit Corva like a warhammer to the chest. She stood there staring at the portrait, mind racing through implications. If Vivian had orc ancestry, If Reynald was her son, then Reynald himself. I was wondering when you'd find it. Corva spun around. Reynald stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. "How long have you been there?" she demanded. "Long enough." He walked into the room, stopped beside her, looked up at his mother's portrait. Beautiful, wasn't she? My father thought so. Right up until the day he figured out what she was. Then suddenly she was very inconveniently dead. He killed her. Fever. Very sudden. Very convenient. Reynald's voice was flat. I was 12. Old enough to remember her. Not old enough to protect her. Master Fulbert was the one who discovered her secret. Some old document he found. Proof of her mixed heritage. 3 days later she was gone. And you knew. I suspected. After she died, her personal effects were locked away, including this portrait. I didn't understand why until I was older, until I started noticing things about myself. He held up his hand. Heals faster than it should. Stronger than I should be. Features that don't quite match my father's or my mother's human relatives. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Turns out I'm not entirely human, which is rather inconvenient when you're trying to rule a kingdom that's been at war with orcs for 3 generations. Corva stared at him. "You're telling me this. Why?" "Because you deserve to know. Because our marriage isn't just a political alliance, it's—" He stopped. Started again. "My mother was part orc, which means I am too. And if Fulbert knows, and I think he does, then this marriage isn't about peace. It's about control. About making sure that if my heritage ever comes out, he already has me tied to the enemy. Proof that I was always compromised. You think he arranged this? I know he did. He was the one who proposed the marriage treaty, who convinced my council it was the only way to end the war, who specifically requested you." Reynald met her eyes. "I thought it was just politics, but now I think he's been playing a much longer game." Corva's mind raced. "The brooch. In the portrait. What about it? I've seen that symbol before. The one on the brooch." She moved closer to the painting, studied the small silver piece at Vivienne's throat. On the surface it showed the Thornwick falcon, but there was something else. A reflection, a shadow. "Can I see the actual brooch?" "It's in my mother's jewelry box, in my quarters. I can—" "Show me, now." Reynald's quarters were somehow both lavish and Spartan. Expensive furniture that looked barely used. Maps spread across a table. Books piled in corners. The room of someone who had wealth but didn't quite know what to do with it. He opened a wooden box on his desk, pulled out the brooch. The moment Corva touched it, she knew. The weight was wrong. Too balanced, like it wanted to be held a certain way. She turned it over. The back was stamped with a symbol that made her heart stop. 3 claws, interlocked. The mark of Clan Ironpeak, her clan. "That's—" Reynald stared. "That's not possible." "It's possible." Corva's voice came out strangled. "This is Ironpeak mark. Only given to family. Only—" She looked up at him. "Your mother wasn't just part orc. She was Ironpeak orc. That would make us related. Distant, but blood." Corva turned the brooch over again, seeing it with new eyes. The twin symbols, human and orc, forged together. "This is why Fulbert wanted this marriage. Not to control you, to destroy both our bloodlines. If we kill each other, if this marriage fails, if war starts again. 2 branches of same tree dead." Ironpeak line ended. "But why? What does he gain?" Before Corva could answer, footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. They both froze. "Lord Reynald?" Fulbert's voice. Smooth. Poisonous. "Are you in there? We need to discuss the northern border situation. It's urgent." Reynald met Corva's eyes. Mouthed, "Hide." She slipped behind a wardrobe as Reynald opened the door. "Master Fulbert, what's so urgent it couldn't wait until morning?" "Apologies, my lord, but I've received concerning reports. It seems your wife has been exploring areas of the castle where she shouldn't be." Fulbert's voice was silk over steel. "The restricted library specifically. My wife is free to go where she pleases." Of course. I merely thought you should know that certain historical documents have gone missing. Documents pertaining to your late mother's lineage. I do hope the Lady Corva hasn't developed an unhealthy curiosity about family history." "What are you implying, Fulbert?" "Nothing, my lord. Simply that some truths are better left buried, for the good of the kingdom, for your own safety. After all, if certain revelations were to become public—" He paused. "Well, the consequences would be most unfortunate, for everyone involved. Are you threatening me?" "I'm protecting you, Lord Reynald, as I've always done. As I protected your father when he had to make difficult choices about your mother." The sound of spectacles being polished. Some bloodlines are too dangerous to preserve. Surely you understand that. The air in the room went cold. Get out, Reynald said quietly. My lord, get out. Footsteps retreated. The door closed. Corva emerged from behind the wardrobe. Reynald was standing perfectly still, hands clenched into fists, jaw tight enough to crack teeth. He killed her, Reynald said. His voice was shaking. Fulbert, not my father. Fulbert discovered what she was, and he killed her because she was a threat to what? His influence? His control? To his power, Corva said. If your mother lived, if truth came out, humans and orcs might make real peace, might unite. But Fulbert needs division, needs war, because in peace, advisors lose importance. In war, they become necessary. He's been orchestrating this entire thing. Reynald looked at her. The war, the treaty, our marriage, all of it to keep both our people weak enough that he can control the pieces. And now we know. Corva held up the brooch. Question is, what do we do about it? The next 2 days were a careful dance of pretending everything was normal while planning what absolutely was not. Reynald continued his duties as lord. Corva continued playing the role of captive wife. They met in secret. The library, the gardens, once memorably in the stables at 2 a.m. when Reynald had information that couldn't wait. They needed proof. Fulbert was too entrenched, too protected by years of loyal service and careful manipulation. They needed evidence so undeniable that even the nobles who supported him would have to acknowledge the truth. The answer came from an unexpected source. Rokash arrived at the castle on the 3rd day, alone, requesting an audience with Lady Corva. Reynald granted it immediately, curious about the orc warrior who'd been described in reports as Corva's mentor. Rokash was 43, scarred, and carrying a small leather bag that clinked when he moved. He had 127 wooden animal figurines in his personal collection. One for every battle survived. Corva had told Reynald about the tradition. It seemed simultaneously ridiculous and deeply meaningful. They met in Corva's quarters. Sybil was sent away, despite her disappointed humming. Chieftain Cromgar sends greetings, Rokash said in Orcish. His common was minimal. Corva translated for Reynald. He also sends warning. Human advisor, tall one with glass eyes, visited our territory 5 days ago. Offered gold, much gold, for information about Iron Peak history, about Lady Vivian. Fulbert, Reynald said. He's trying to get ahead of us. Find evidence he can destroy. What did my father tell him? Corva asked. Nothing, but old warriors have long memories. Rokash opened the leather bag, pulled out a scroll. Your grandmother kept records. Write down clan history, including story of daughter who married human lord 35 years ago, daughter who died in childbirth, baby lost. He paused. Or so we thought. Corva took the scroll with shaking hands. Read it. Went very pale. This says, your grandmother's sister. Name was Vikra. She married human lord from Thornwick territory. Had child. Died. Baby was supposed to die too. But lord's new wife, Lady Vivian's mother, she took baby. Raised as her own. No one knew child had orc blood because mother was clever. Used herbs to hide features when child was young. Lady Vivian, Reynald breathed. She was full-blooded orc. Half-blood, Rokash corrected. Father was human lord, but yes, she was Iron Peak, was family. He looked at Corva. Which makes you and human lord cousins, 3rd cousins, same great-great-grandmother. The room went silent. This is the proof, Corva said finally. This is what Fulbert was looking for, what he was afraid we'd find. There's more. Rokash pulled out another document. This one was human-made, official-looking, with seals and signatures. Found this in Human Records Office. Took some convincing to obtain. Certificate of death for Lady Vivian. Signed by physician. Natural causes, it says. What's significant about that? Reynald asked. Physician who signed this? Rokash tapped the name. Died 2 months after Lady Vivian. Also natural causes. Also very sudden. Also very convenient. Reynald took the document, studied it. His hands were trembling. Master Fulbert's signature is at the bottom, as witness. He had the physician killed too, Corva said. Covered his tracks. Made sure no one could question the diagnosis. But why? Reynald demanded. Why kill my mother? Why orchestrate all of this? What does Fulbert actually gain? War, Rokash said simply. Long war means Lord needs advisors, needs gold, needs someone to manage chaos. In peace, advisors become unnecessary. In war, they become irreplaceable. He smiled, showing tusks. And man who controls gold in wartime can become very rich, if no one looks too closely at where gold goes. He's been embezzling, Reynald said slowly, using the war as cover to steal from the kingdom's treasury. And if peace happened, if my mother had lived and promoted unity, someone might have audited the books, found the theft. So he killed her, Corva finished. Started rumor about Orc invasion to justify increased military spending. Used confusion to steal more. Then perpetuated conflict for 30 years while he got rich. Reynald stood up, walked to the window, stared out at the castle grounds. We need to bring this before the council. Tonight. All of it. They won't believe us, Corva warned. Fulbert has been trusted advisor for 40 years. We are compromised, I know. Reynald turned back. But we have proof, documents, witnesses, and we have something else. He held up the brooch. Tradition says that twice a year, the Lord must appear before the full council and swear their oath of honest service to the crown. Fulbert has to attend, has to swear. And if he's caught in a lie, protocol demands he be removed from position immediately and investigated for treason. When is next oath? Rokash asked. Tomorrow night. The council chamber was full. Every noble in the territory had been summoned for the oath ceremony. Fulbert stood before them all, hand over heart, speaking the traditional words of loyalty and honest service. Corva watched from her position beside Reynald's throne. She was wearing full formal dress, human style, because appearances mattered in moments like this. But underneath the silk, she had her knife, just in case. Fulbert finished his oath, bowed, turned to leave. Master Fulbert, Reynald said, his voice carried through the chamber. Before you go, I have a question. Fulbert stopped, turned back. His expression was carefully neutral, but his hand moved to his spectacles, began polishing them. Of course, my lord. You served my father faithfully for many years. I did. And my grandfather before him. Yes, my lord. Then surely you remember Lady Vivian, my mother. A pause, infinitesimal. But there. Of course. A great tragedy. Her death. Indeed. Fever, wasn't it? Yes, my lord. Very sudden. Reynald stood, walked down the steps of his throne, crossed the chamber until he was standing directly in front of Fulbert. Strange thing about that fever. The physician who diagnosed it died shortly after. Also very suddenly. Fulbert's jaw tightened. Coincidence, my lord. These things happen. Do they? Reynald pulled the death certificate from his coat. This is the official record, signed by the physician, witnessed by you. It says natural causes, but I've had other physicians review the symptoms described in the private medical notes. They all agree that the symptoms don't match fever. They match something else, something specific. He paused. Poison, nightshade most likely. Slow acting. Difficult to detect. The room went deadly quiet. You cannot be suggesting. Fulbert started. I'm not suggesting, I'm stating. You discovered my mother's heritage, found proof that she had orc blood, realized that if this became public, if she promoted unity between humans and orcs, your carefully constructed system of perpetual conflict would collapse. So you killed her, made it look like natural causes, had the physician eliminated when he started asking uncomfortable questions. This is absurd. Fulbert looked at the assembled nobles. Lord Reynald is clearly distraught. The stress of his new marriage has... I have proof. Reynald nodded to Rokash, who stepped forward with the scrolls. Clan records from Iron Peak. Proof of Lady Vivian's ancestry. Proof of the bloodline you tried to erase. Orc records mean nothing. And this. Reynald held up the brooch. Lady Vivian's personal effects. The twin-forged brooch. Look at it, Master Fulbert, really look at it. He tossed the brooch. Fulbert caught it reflexively, turned it over, saw the Iron Peak symbol on the back. His face went white. You knew, Reynald said softly. You've always known. That brooch was in my mother's jewelry box. You could have destroyed it any time. But you kept it. Insurance, maybe. Proof you could use if you ever needed leverage. Except now it's proof of your crime. Fulbert's hands were shaking. The brooch slipped from his fingers, clattered to the stone floor. I served this kingdom. Everything I did was for your own wealth. Corva spoke for the first time, her accented common cutting through the chamber. You needed war. Needed conflict. So you created it. Killed woman who would bring peace. Stole kingdom gold while everyone watched borders instead of books. Made yourself necessary by making world dangerous. And then, Reynald continued, when I took power and started looking for ways to end the war you'd perpetuated, you proposed this marriage. Not as peace treaty, as insurance. If my heritage ever came out, if anyone discovered I had orc blood too, you could point to my marriage as proof I'd been compromised all along. Either way, you won. Either I destroyed myself trying to hide the truth, or I destroyed myself by revealing it. But you didn't plan for one thing, Corva added. You didn't plan for us to find each other, to trust each other, to work together instead of against each other. Fulbert looked between them, at the assembled nobles, at the documents in Rokash's hands, at the brooch on the floor. His carefully constructed world was collapsing around him, and they could all see it happening in real time. You have no proof, he said finally, but his voice was weak. No proof I killed anyone. These are accusations, speculation. You cannot. Seize him, Reynald said. Guards moved forward. Fulbert tried to run, made it 3 steps before Rokash casually stepped into his path. The orc warrior was large enough to qualify as a geological feature. Fulbert bounced off him and fell. I would like to add, Rokash said in careful comment, that Iron Peak clan would very much like to question this man about murder of family member. In orc tradition, blood debt must be paid. I'm sure that can be arranged, Reynolds said, after human justice is satisfied. The guards dragged Fulbert away. He was screaming now, protesting, demanding lawyers and mercy and fair trial. No one listened. The nobles watched in silence, understanding slowly dawning that their trusted advisor had been bleeding them dry for 3 decades. When the chamber finally emptied, Corva and Reynald stood alone in the center of the room. The twin-forged brooch lay on the floor between them. Reynald picked it up, held it out to her. This belongs to your family. Our family, Corva corrected. She took the brooch, pinned it to her dress. We're cousins, remember? 3rd cousins. The marriage is still legal. Lucky us, she smiled. It was the first genuine smile she'd given since arriving. So what happens now? Now? Reynald looked around the empty chamber. Now we figure out how to actually create the peace this marriage was supposed to represent. We have proof that humans and orcs can share bloodlines. We have a corrupt advisor removed from power. We have an opportunity to rebuild. And we have each other, Corva added. Not as husband and wife in the way you humans think of it, but as allies, family, partners in fixing the mess our peoples made. Think it'll work? Don't know, but I'm willing to try if you are. Reynald extended his hand. Corva took it. They stood there, human lord and orc warrior, joined by blood and circumstance, and a shared determination to build something better than what they'd inherited. One question, Reynald said. The brooch, twin-forged. What does that actually mean in Iron Peak tradition? Means 2 things joined that should not be separated, usually given at weddings, or blood bonds, or promises that transcend normal vows. She looked down at the brooch, at the dual symbols catching candlelight. Means that what is forged together is stronger than what stands alone. Appropriate. Yeah. Corva smiled again. Yeah, I think it is. 3 months later, Chieftain Cromgar visited Castle Thornwick as an honored guest, not a prisoner. He ate at the high table, spoke with human nobles, signed the first trade agreement between their peoples in over a century. 6 months later, the first mixed council formed. 3 humans, 3 orcs. Reynald and Corva presiding together as co-leaders. It was messy, chaotic. Arguments happened daily, but it worked. 1 year later, a human child and an orc child played together in the castle gardens, while their parents watched nervously, but hopefully. 2 years later, Corva stood in the throne room, the same room where she'd knelt in chains, and addressed a crowd of both species. We were told we couldn't coexist, she said. That blood made us enemies. That green skin and pink skin could never build together, break bread together, raise children together. We were told that peace was impossible. She held up the twin-forged brooch. Let it catch the light. Let everyone see both symbols equally displayed. But the ones who told us that, they were the ones who profited from war, who needed us divided because united people ask uncomfortable questions, who built their power on our blood and pain and fear. Reynald stood beside her. Some of you still doubt this can work. Some of you still see division where we're building bridges. That's natural. Fear is natural. But so is courage. And choosing hope over hate takes more bravery than any battlefield ever demanded. Change is slow, Corva continued, like water wearing stone. You don't see it day by day, but over years, over generations, the impossible becomes inevitable. We won't see the full world we're building, but our children will, and their children after them. She looked out at the crowd, at the humans and orcs standing together, not perfectly integrated, not without tension, but together nonetheless. Today we sign the Unity Accord, Reynald said. It guarantees equal rights, shared governance, and mutual defense. It's not perfect, Nothing ever is. But it's a start. Cromgar stepped forward, held out his hand. Reynald took it. The crowd erupted in applause, some enthusiastic, some hesitant, but all present. That night, Corva stood on the battlements, looking out over the kingdom she'd been forced into and somehow learned to call home. Reynald found her there, as he often did during quiet moments. "Regret it?" he asked. "The marriage? The choice? All of this?" Corva thought about it. Really thought about it. About the father she'd been separated from. About the life as a warrior she'd lost. About the chains disguised as ceremony that had brought her here. "I regret that it was necessary," she said finally. "I regret that my freedom was the price of peace. I regret that we needed tragedy to find truth." She touched the brooch at her throat. "But I don't regret what we've built. What we're building. This isn't the life I would have chosen, but it's the life I have. And I think we're making it mean something." "We are," Reynald agreed. "Not perfectly, but genuinely." They stood in companionable silence, watching the sun set over a kingdom that was slowly, painfully, hopefully learning to be whole. Some victories aren't won on battlefields. They're won in quiet moments of choosing trust over suspicion, of choosing hope over hate, of looking at someone who was supposed to be your enemy and seeing family instead. Blood makes you orc. Blood makes you human. The choices make you who you are. And legacy isn't what you inherit. It's what you build, what you leave behind, what you forge in the fires of impossible circumstances. The twin-forged brooch caught the last light of the sun. 2 symbols, 2 peoples, 1 future. Some legacies are written in blood, others are written in courage, and the best ones, they're written in the spaces where broken people choose to fix each other, one decision at a time. If this story moved you, subscribe to Orcbound Tales. Every week we bring you powerful stories about impossible bonds, broken systems, and characters who choose love over hate, because the strongest warriors aren't the ones who destroy their enemies. They're the ones brave enough to turn them into allies,